After being reborn, I saved my son 1 second before the thermos flask fell. Then I hid my son. When I got off work, I pretended to be surprised and asked, "Where is my son?" In a month, I made her family ruined, be condemned by thousands of people, and kneel in front of me crying and begging me to forgive her. Before marriage, my mother-in-law was gentle and considerate. She always said that she would love me as her daughter. After marriage, she miraculously changed. First, she borrowed my betrothal gift. Then, she watched me do housework and taught me to be diligent and considerate to my husband. Later, she joined forces with relatives to urge me to have a baby. She promised every sentence, "I will take care of the child. I will pay for the milk powder." The truth is that she didn't show up during the whole pregnancy. She didn't answer the phone when I was giving birth. It wasn't until she learned that I had given birth to a son that she came to the hospital happily. She handed me a red rope and said it was a gift for her eldest grandson. Later, I learned that the red rope was bought by her at a stall outside the hospital. It was worth 2 yuan. It was the only gift my mother-in-law gave to her eldest grandson. In the following 2 years, she either had a backache or a leg ache. In short, she couldn't help take care of her grandson. Occasionally, she made a video call and shouted that she missed her grandson so much that she couldn't sleep. Then she changed the subject and began to complain about being poor, saying things like whose son gave so and so how much money. My husband is soft-hearted, so he secretly gives her money. I gave up my career establishment as a high school teacher and took care of my son full-time. I won't mention how I spent those 2 years. People who haven't raised a highly demanding and allergic child can't understand at all. Finally, when the child was 2 years old and could walk and communicate, I could take a break. My mother-in-law knocked on my door. "Nancy, I will take care of the child. You go to work. You can't always let my son earn money alone while you enjoy a life of ease at home." Enjoy a life of ease? In 2 years, I lost nearly 20 caddies. I took care of the child day and night. Is this called enjoying a life of ease? Naturally, I refuse to give in. Have you ever taken care of him? You say I enjoy a life of ease? He is allergic and very difficult to take care of. You either have a backache or a leg ache. How can you take care of him? My mother-in-law exploded. First, she cried in front of my husband. Then, she called my mother and cried. Then, she went to the neighbors in the community and complained that I wouldn't let her take care of the child. She said that she missed her grandson so much that she was losing a lot of hair. I was exhausted by all this. My husband coaxed me and said, "Honey, just go to work. Kiki is also 2 years old. Mom can take care of him. Wasn't I brought up by her when I was a child? Moreover, it is really difficult for me to support the 3 of us with my salary alone. Honey, please help me." I looked at my husband and compromised. But that was also the beginning of my nightmare. On the first day of work, before I left, I repeatedly told Kiki that he was allergic to many things and couldn't eat them. Allergic children have a very low sense of security and need a lot of care. Especially when he is just with his grandma, he must be uncomfortable in many places. My mother-in-law agreed wholeheartedly. But in the afternoon, I received a phone call. The person on the other end told me a shocking news. Kiki was scalded. He was severely scalded all over his body. I was trembling all over. When I rushed to the hospital, Kiki was already unconscious. The skin on his whole face was wrinkled. There was not a good place on his body. My mother-in-law murmured to herself, "If she didn't have to go to work, why would I come to take care of the child? This child is so difficult to take care of. I have pain all over. How can I watch him? She has spoiled the child. So naughty." I was furious and rushed over to beat her to the ground. But this couldn't bring back my Kiki. My son stayed in the intensive care unit for 3 days and finally died of organ failure due to severe infection. Kiki died in my arms. I cried so hard that I almost fainted. I called out again and again, "Kiki, look at Mom." Just last night, he was still in my arms, acting coquettishly and asking Mom to buy him a cheese stick. After Kiki died, my mother-in-law hid herself early when I wasn't paying attention. She didn't mean to apologize at all. And I looked at my husband with bloodshot eyes. He stammered, Mom didn't mean it. She didn't want this to happen either. In fact, people in the chess and card room couldn't bear to tell me. My mother-in-law thought the child was too noisy. Only 20 minutes after I left for work, she left Kiki alone at home. At the same time, there was a freshly boiled thermos flask on the dining table. Kiki was only 2 years old. He naively knocked over the thermos flask and scalded himself. He didn't know how long he had cried. Then he fainted and it was from morning to afternoon. My mother-in-law was extremely hungry after playing cards and came home to eat. Only then did she discover this scene. Does she have a heart? Is she a human being? I told my husband with tears in my eyes, Mom must be very scared. She really didn't mean it. Take me to see her and comfort her. My husband hesitated and believed me. He drove me to a relative's house where my mother-in-law was hiding. I entered the door calmly. When I saw my mother-in-law, I even smiled. She immediately relaxed and looked at me with disgust. I told you long ago that children can't be raised so carefully. If it weren't for you, Kiki wouldn't have had an accident. Her tone was righteous and without any sense of guilt. I smiled and took out the knife in my pocket and stabbed it into her abdomen. One stab, and another stab. I laughed heartily. Tears rolled down, I didn't mean it either. But the knife has no eyes. Probably because I was extremely sad. The place I stabbed didn't hit a vital part. My mother-in-law was only seriously injured but didn't die. Now, her whole family went crazy. They looked for the media and lawyers everywhere and insisted on sentencing me to death. And I was heartbroken. I dreamed of Kiki every night and had no desire to live. On a silent night, I swallowed a whole bottle of pills. Kiki, Mom is coming to accompany you. Perhaps because of God's mercy, when I woke up again, I was actually on the subway on my way to work. I trembled and opened the calendar on my phone. Then I turned around and jumped off the slowly moving bus and ran home desperately. Kiki, Mom is coming. This time, Mom will definitely not let anything happen to you. When I entered the door, Kiki was crying so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. A 2-year-old child, the apple of my eye that I take care of day and night, was left alone at home. His throat was hoarse from crying. Kiki was helplessly stumbling towards the dining table. On the table was an electric kettle that was boiling. If I had arrived home 1 second later, the consequences would be unimaginable. My heart was broken into dumpling filling. I held Kiki and cried loudly. Kai kai, me babe. Mama's back. Mama's back. I touched Kiki's warm little hand and looked up and down at his tender and fair skin. Thinking again and again of how he was completely disfigured by burns all over his body in my previous life, hatred welled up in my heart. Kiki plunged into my arms and shouted with a tremor, Mom. On that day, I sent Kiki to my best friend's house. Then I didn't go home until I comforted Kiki to sleep at 8:30 in the evening. As soon as I entered the door, my mother-in-law pointed at me and cursed loudly. You slut! You come back so late from work. You went to steal someone. If it weren't for you, Kiki wouldn't be lost. My husband, Harrison, had an ugly expression. He looked at me hesitantly and said, Mom said that at around 7 o'clock, she thought you should be back from work, so she went downstairs to take out the trash. When she came back, Kiki was gone. I sneered in my heart, but on the surface, I looked panicked. Kiki is gone? A trace of guilt flashed in my mother-in-law's eyes, but she pointed at me with her finger and cursed even louder. If anything happens to my grandson, I'll make you pay. This stupid old woman. I don't know how she managed to do it. Clearly, it was her fault for watching the child, but not only was she not at all guilty, she could also tell lies and push the responsibility onto me. My husband carefully watched my reaction and stammered, Nancy, shall we go downstairs to look for him? If we can't find him, we'll call the police. I rushed in and searched through several rooms, trying to make my breakdown look more real. Where's Kiki? Where's Kiki? Where did you hide Kiki? Such a big child. How could he be lost just like that? Seeing that I was getting crazier and crazier, my husband and mother-in-law looked at each other. Then I turned around and slapped my mother-in-law hard with a round swing of my arm. It was you who forced me to go to work. You promised repeatedly that you could take good care of Kiki. I just worked overtime a bit. When I came back, Kiki was lost by you. I tell you, today you two must find Kiki for me. If you can't find him, I'll take your lives. My mother-in-law was slapped and staggered and fell to the ground. My husband subconsciously said, "How could you hit my mom? She is an elder after all." I slapped him on the other cheek. Get lost and find the child. For several days in a row, my mother-in-law and husband were forced by me to go out and look for the child everywhere. But where can we find him in the vast sea of people? As soon as they came back, I would make a scene and curse, attracting neighbors to come and watch. At this time, finally someone couldn't help but speak up. You old woman. On the day the child was lost, it seems that you played mahjong in the mahjong parlor all day. From 9 in the morning to more than 5 in the afternoon. My husband was stunned. Taking this opportunity, I rushed up, grabbed my mother-in-law's hair and started hitting her. Didn't you say you took care of Kiki all day and Kiki was only lost when you went downstairs to take out the trash at around 7 o'clock? Why didn't you tell us immediately when Kiki was lost? What's on your mind? My mother-in-law was beaten and howled. Pressed down by me, her mouth hit the cement platform and half of a tooth was knocked out. The onlookers tooted. Everyone knows how difficult it is to raise a child now. Such a mother-in-law is really irresponsible. My husband tried to come up and break up the fight. I stretched out my long nails that I had deliberately kept for several days and scratched his face. Instantly, there were several bloody marks. A mother who has lost her child can make a scene however she wants, and no one dares to blame her. But as time passed, in just a short week, my mother-in-law and husband couldn't take it anymore. She stood on the top of the building in the community, crying loudly and threatening to commit suicide. Which grandma doesn't love her grandson? I'm just too old to take care of a child. I accidentally lost the child, but I didn't do it on purpose. If she really loves the child, why doesn't she take care of it herself? Hand the child over to an old woman like me. My daughter-in-law is forcing me to pay with my life. Then I'll pay with my life. No matter who it is, as long as they make a scene and threaten suicide, what's wrong becomes right. My husband knelt on the ground and begged his mother not to be excited. Then he turned and looked at me hatefully. Kiki is lost. Even if you force my mom to death, Kiki won't come back. Nancy, you are so vicious. Just as he was speaking, a short-haired woman in her 30s rushed up from behind, pushed me away, ran over crying. Mom, don't be stupid. Don't sacrifice your life for a bitch. If Kiki is lost, just let Harrison have another grandson for you. Isn't that okay? This person is my husband's sister. I remembered the surveillance video on the day Kiki was lost. Right after we left for work, my sister-in-law went to our house. That pot of hot water was boiled by her. It was also her idea to tell my mother-in-law to lock the child at home and go play mahjong. What's wrong with the child crying? When we were little, adults would lock the child at home when they went to work in the fields. It won't break from crying. Mom, you are old. You should enjoy yourself. Let Kiki play at home by himself. You can come back at mealtime. Isn't that okay? In the surveillance video, she had an ugly look and was full of confidence. Then, she changed the topic and discussed with my mother-in-law about borrowing our house for her child to go to school. Kiki is still young. Mom, do you think Harrison's house can be transferred to my name first? Your grandson will start primary school in the second half of the year. This house is in a school district. You can't just watch your grandson have no school to go to, can you? He is so smart and definitely material for Tsinghua University or Peking University. My mother-in-law agreed immediately. This is just a small matter? I'll talk to Harrison later. That attitude was completely ignoring my existence, just like now. My mother-in-law stood by the railing on the top of the building. My husband and sister-in-law were crying and persuading respectively. The onlookers also kept persuading her to think it over. It wasn't until the firefighters arrived that my mother-in-law stopped making a fuss. I watched coldly throughout. After all, the good show was yet to come. Sure enough, as soon as we got home, my mother-in-law started pretending to be sick. How can Kiki's loss be blamed on me? If you had insisted on taking care of him yourselves at the beginning, nothing would have happened. Now that it has happened, if you still blame me, I will commit suicide. My husband is soft-hearted. Nancy, Mom really didn't mean it. Kiki is lost. We've looked for him, and if we really can't find him, there's nothing we can do. But life still has to go on. Don't make a fuss anymore. I smiled. Yes, it's just losing a child. What's there to fuss about? They don't feel the pain until the needle pricks them. So naturally, it's their turn to be pricked by the needle next. My sister-in-law looked at me sarcastically. Maybe it's your bad luck that's harming your son. Besides, if Kiki is lost, you can just have another one, can't you? I rushed up and slapped her. If your son is lost, you won't look for him either? My sister-in-law covered her face and was so angry that she jumped. Harrison. What kind of shrew did you marry? I'm not wrong. She hit Mom and then me. Divorce her. My husband was also very dissatisfied with me and immediately shouted, Nancy, are you crazy? Apologize to my sister quickly. I completely ignored them. My sister-in-law's eyes rolled. It's okay if you don't apologize. Harrison, since Kiki is already lost, then transfer your school district house to my name first. My son will start primary school in the second half of the year. At the beginning, the down payment for this house was made by me and Harrison. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law didn't contribute a penny. Now my husband is still paying off the loan. So my husband hesitated at my sister-in-law's suggestion. My mother-in-law, who had just been pretending to be sick and lying down, quickly got up. Harrison, you can't be partial to outsiders. Now that Kiki is lost, your sister's child is equivalent to your child. Is it appropriate for you not to contribute to his schooling? Transfer this house to your sister's name. When the child's schooling is arranged, it will be returned to you. My sister-in-law also said plaintively, Harrison, don't you remember how I loved you when you were a child? I even taught you how to walk. When you went to college, I also helped you with your tuition fees, right? Now that you've made it, are you going to ignore me? After a few words, my husband's heart softened instantly. He just hesitated and turned to look at me. But, this house is in my and Nancy's names. If it's transferred to Big Sister, Nancy has to sign and agree too. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law exchanged glances. Just as they were about to unite and force me, they didn't expect me to change my attitude. I smiled brightly. Okay, since Kiki is lost, I really have no use for this house anymore. Transferring it to you is fine, but you have to pay me a deposit of 150,000 yuan. After all, I have no blood relationship with you. What if you refuse to return the house to me in the future? My sister-in-law immediately became anxious. What are you? What nonsense are you talking? My brother's house is transferred to me, and I still have to pay a deposit? I smiled faintly. Then you can just go and buy one yourself. The school district houses here are at least 1.2 million yuan a set now. The down payment also has to be 400,000 yuan. Consider it yourself. The next day, after my sister-in-law and mother-in-law discussed it, they agreed to the 150,000 yuan deposit. I sneered in my heart. I already knew that my sister-in-law had no intention of returning this house. She thought it was a great deal to buy a house for 150,000 yuan, but it doesn't matter anymore. Harrison can give the house to whoever he wants. I'll just take this 150,000 yuan as the divorce settlement. The transfer of ownership can't be done for a while. My mother-in-law is sick every day. During the day, I am busy looking for the child. In fact, I have found a new job and quietly sent Kiki to an expensive daycare center. At night, my best friend helps me pick up Kiki and take him to her house. At night, after putting Kiki to sleep, I return to the home I share with Harrison. And take care of my mother-in-law as Harrison instructs. After all, she is my mom. My mom gave birth to me and raised me. How can I blame her? Since it has happened, don't mention it anymore. In a few months, we can have another child. When Harrison mentions Kiki, this is his attitude. I didn't say anything. I chopped off the ribs with a big knife flying in my hand, which made his face change, and he went back to the bedroom. I considerately stewed pork rib soup to nourish my mother-in-law's body. Afraid that she wouldn't sleep well, I added a calming and brain-nourishing liquid. In addition, I also put an old mobile phone under her bed in her room. Every late at night, an alarm would ring regularly. In the alarm, there is the shrill cry of a child. Woo woo woo, wah. Wah. Mom. Woo woo woo, wah. Wah. Mom. My mother-in-law was sleeping deeply because of the calming and brain-nourishing liquid, but was awakened by the crying. She opened her eyes drowsily, but heard that the sound was gone. For 3 consecutive days, my mother-in-law was so scared that she wanted to go back to her hometown, but my husband thought she was overthinking. I was even more considerate and said, "If you go back to your hometown, who will take care of you? Besides, for the matter of your sister's house transfer, you have to be a witness. Otherwise, I won't agree to this matter." For the sake of letting her grandson go to school, my mother-in-law endured and continued to stay at my house. But she slept more and more. In just 10 days or so, she became all muddled and always muttered about dreaming of a child crying. And I also woke Harrison up every night. With a pale face and disheveled hair, I complained to Harrison, "Honey, I dreamed of Kiki." "Did you dream of him?" This kind of life finally drove Harrison to the point of collapse. He often stayed at the company on the pretext of working overtime. One day when he came back to get his clothes, I took out the USB flash drive from his computer bag. Harrison quickly got his clothes and took his computer bag and left. Before leaving, he also reminded me, "Wife, it's not easy for my mom to raise me. She has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. In fact, elders are all for the good of juniors, right? Thank you for taking good care of her." I smiled sweetly. Of course. On the contrary, I added 2 more bottles of calming and brain-nourishing liquid. Make the music at night even more terrifying. And for that USB flash drive, I deliberately put it where my mother-in-law could see it and reminded her, "Mom, this is something needed for finding a job. It's very important. If it's lost, I won't be able to find a job in the future. You must be careful not to break it." My mother-in-law looked at me with a pale face. There was still poison in her eyes. Even though I served her meals every day, I still couldn't get a good look from her. "If there are no surprises, in an hour, that USB flash drive will be gone." Mother-in-law said indifferently, "I didn't mean it. At my age, I don't understand what this is. I just thought of picking it up and looking at it. Who knew how it ended up in the sewer?" My face changed greatly, and there was obvious smugness in mother-in-law's eyes. But in the next second, Harrison pushed the door in and was out of breath. "Wife, is my USB flash drive at home? That's the final version of the design draft I've been working on for half a year. I need to take it to the company today." The smugness in mother-in-law's eyes disappeared instantly. I said innocently, "I don't know. Mom just said that she accidentally dropped the USB flash drive into the sewer." For the first time, my husband roared at his mother, "Do you know how important that is to me? Without this USB flash drive, I will lose my job. Can you stop causing trouble all day?" Mother-in-law was so frightened that she sat on the ground and cried, "Oh my ancestor. My son is scolding his own mother. I don't want to live anymore." On that day, my husband was fired and all the clothes he had just moved to the company were brought back. The mother and son were at daggers drawn. I couldn't help laughing out loud in the kitchen. What's this? The fun is yet to come. After my husband lost his job, mother-in-law became much more honest, but still said with tears that it was my fault for not telling her that it was something related to her son's job. I looked at her innocently. "I told you. Mom, did you think it was something I needed for my job? No matter what, a USB flash drive won't walk into the sewer by itself. Do you think it's okay if you damage something for my job?" Mother-in-law was speechless. Suddenly, she knelt on the ground and kowtowed to us. "I was wrong. Even if I took out my heart and gave it to you, you still wouldn't be satisfied. This old bone, deserve to die. I deserve to die. I deserve to die. She knelt on the ground, crying and scolding, slapping herself crazily. My husband looked at her with gritted teeth, trembling with anger. I quickly used his words to persuade him, "That's your mother. It wasn't easy for her to give birth to you and raise you. How could she have bad intentions?" He couldn't stand it anymore. He picked up his bag and left without saying where he was going. But I know because there is a children's phone watch with several functions such as recording, calling, and positioning in the interlayer of his bag. In the middle of the night, when mother-in-law was trapped in a nightmare, I held my mobile phone and heard my husband's voice borrowing money to speculate in stocks on the other end. And the sound of him having an affair with an intern from his previous company in a hotel. Like mother, like son. With his mother and elder sister being like that, he can pretend to be a gentleman for a few years, but not for a lifetime. My heart ached, but looking back on these years, if it weren't for my persuasion, Harrison wouldn't have been able to walk on the right path at all. He doesn't like to work hard and always fantasizes about getting something for nothing. We have quarreled many times because of his secretly speculating in stocks. When female colleagues show their affection, he pretends to be stupid and indulges. If it weren't for me making him pull back from the brink of the precipice again and again, we don't know how many times we would have divorced. Now that I let go, he immediately shows his true colors. In the mobile phone, my husband's voice and the intern's voice are clearly audible. "How can my wife compare to you? She is just a yellow-faced woman who always nags and controls everything. Even having sex once depends on whether she has time. I'm already tired of her." Brother Harrison, then when will you divorce? Now that Kiki is gone, don't wear it tonight. I promise to give you a son. Don't worry. When I successfully transfer the house to my elder sister and get 150,000 yuan, I will divorce her. Jojo, why is your waist so smooth? I really love it to death. Oh, you are so bad. The two of them were laughing and entangling. It made me sick to death, but I don't intend to expose him. After all, this is just one step in the plan. The next day, mother-in-law was in even worse spirits. During the day, she insisted that she heard a child crying. I looked surprised. No. When elder sister-in-law came, mother-in-law just opened her mouth. She wanted to say that she hadn't slept well recently and always heard a child crying. Elder sister-in-law interrupted her, "Mom, you are overthinking. The most important thing for us today is to handle the house transfer. We can talk about other things later." Elder sister-in-law handed me a card. "There are 150,000 yuan in here. When I return the house to you later, you must remember to return the money to me." I casually took out a POS machine and wanted to transfer 150,000 yuan to my card. But who knew that in the next moment, the machine prompted insufficient balance. Elder sister-in-law's face turned pale. She didn't expect me to do this. She could only reluctantly take out another card. I must have taken the wrong card just now. I was too lazy to waste words with her and quickly transferred the money to my card. Then I went to the notary office with mother-in-law, elder sister-in-law, and Harrison. And transferred the house to elder sister-in-law's name. Along the way, elder sister-in-law kept playing the family card with Harrison. Harrison nodded repeatedly. It wasn't until mother-in-law almost fell down unsteadily that the brother and sister noticed something was wrong with mother-in-law. But after mother-in-law went to the hospital for an examination, the doctor suggested that she see a psychiatrist. I also accompanied her. The doctor asked a few questions. I said beside her, "Is it because she played mahjong when taking care of the child and the child was lost, so she feels guilty and that's why she is like this?" Hearing this, the doctor looked at mother-in-law. "It's probably psychological. She needs to come out of it by herself. We can't treat it here." Since the doctor said there was no way to treat it, what could the children do? Elder sister-in-law and husband felt even more that mother-in-law was making a fuss for nothing. As soon as they left the hospital, elder sister-in-law looked at me and curled her lips. "The house has been transferred to me. I have to move in and decorate it first. It will be convenient for the child to live in when he goes to school in the second half of the year. Otherwise, you can go rent a house for a while? Harrison, when I was working to support you in studying, I lived in the basement. Harrison quickly said, Sister, you move in. I found a new job. For now, I will live in the company first. Let Nancy go back to her mother's house to live. He pulled me to move out and asked me for the 150,000 yuan at the same time. Naturally, I didn't want to get entangled with his mother and sisters anymore. My mother-in-law's mental state was very poor. Now she would have auditory hallucinations even without playing music. Something big would happen in a few days. Moving out at this time could actually make me clear of any responsibility. Harrison urged me again and again for the 150,000 yuan, so I handed him a card. His face was full of joy. Wife, I knew you were the best. Don't worry. After we have a new child, I will definitely treat you better. I smiled and said nothing. I gave the card. As for whether there is money in the card, who knows? For the next period of time, I stayed at my best friend's house. During the day, I sent Kiki to the nursery. In the evening, after work, I picked him up and took him to my best friend's house to stay. I took a sales job at the nursery. Because of my hard work, I made more than a dozen deals in the first month after joining the company. My income in the first month reached 20,000 yuan. Perhaps out of a compensatory psychology, I treated Kiki even better. I took care of every detail and regarded him as the best baby in the world. And Kiki always put his arms around my neck and sweetly called me Mom. As for my mother-in-law, my elder sister-in-law soon moved in with her husband and son. She spent 150,000 yuan to exchange for a house worth more than 1 million yuan. Who wouldn't say she's amazing? Even under the power of her playing the family card, the mortgage is still being paid by her younger brother, my husband Harrison. Until one day, the creditor came to the door. Harrison loves stock trading. He's not good at it but still loves to play. In the past, when I advised him, he would restrain himself a lot. But now that in turn only praises him for being so awesome. Harrison then takes out loans everywhere to trade stocks. He always feels that he can turn things around overnight. But not only did he not turn things around, he also lost all the money he borrowed from various apps. As for the card I gave him, when he went to withdraw money, he found that it was an empty card. Harrison angrily called me, "Why did you give me an empty card? Nancy, are you human? I'm short of money now. Hurry up and transfer the money to me." I responded with a smile, "Really? Isn't it popular in your family to give empty cards? When your mother gave the betrothal gift, she also gave an empty card. After being exposed by me after marriage, she pretended to stuff a stack of money into my hand. After half an hour, she borrowed it again and never mentioned it again. Your sister took the house and said she would give me 150,000 yuan. She also gave an empty card. If I hadn't been vigilant, the card in my hand now would also be an empty card." Harrison shouted angrily, "Nancy, I don't care. Anyway, now you quickly give me that 150,000 yuan. You poisonous woman. You want to drive me to death." I sneered, "After marriage, I was responsible for taking care of the child and you were responsible for making money. But that doesn't mean I did nothing. Even if we get divorced, the down payment for the house should be divided equally. For the 300,000 down payment, half for you and half for me. I won't bother about the money for repayment. You ask me for money? In your next life." After saying that, I hung up the phone with a snap. Then I opened the mobile phone monitoring and soon saw the farce in the original home. After my elder sister-in-law's family moved in, my mother-in-law became even more seriously ill. She always said there were ghosts and children crying. My elder sister-in-law was also impatient and scolded her terribly. The mother and daughter quarreled every day. Today, while they were arguing, someone knocked on the door. When my elder sister-in-law opened the door and saw several burly men with large tattoos on their arms burst in aggressively, "This is Harrison's home, right? Where is he? Call him out to pay back the money." My mother-in-law still wanted to be unreasonable. First, she didn't have enough strength because of her illness. Second, she didn't dare to be unreasonable to these people. She could only ask carefully, "How could my son owe money? You must have made a mistake, right?" My elder sister-in-law also shouted, "My younger brother is a top student. He earns more than 10,000 yuan a month. It's impossible for him to be in debt." She was still counting on her younger brother to pay the mortgage. After deceiving for 10 or 20 years, she would be equivalent to getting a house worth more than 1 million yuan for only 150,000 yuan. Those people didn't listen to their nonsense. One of them came up and slapped my elder sister-in-law to the ground. "I'm asking you where Harrison is. If you can't call him out, you will pay this money. A total of 500,000 yuan. My elder sister-in-law's husband was scared and quickly called Harrison. Harrison on the other end heard the screams of his mother and sister and hurried back. As soon as he arrived at the door, he saw the chaos at home. His mother was like crazy, "My son will never owe money. My son is a college student. You dare to bully my son and my daughter. I'll beat you to death." She was crazy. In her mind, the shrill cry of a child rang out again. My mother-in-law picked up the just-boiled thermos next to her and splashed it at the several burly men at the door. One of the burly men with quick eyes and hands grabbed Harrison, who had just arrived at the door, and used him as a shield in front of himself. A thermos of just-boiled hot water was poured over Harrison's head. A shrill scream rang out instantly. "Ah!" Harrison rolled on the ground in pain. His mother was stunned. My elder sister-in-law quickly shouted, "Quickly, Mom, think of a way. What should we do if he's scalded?" In a state of panic, my mother-in-law blurted out subconsciously, this. In the old days, when someone was scalded in our hometown, we would quickly peel off the skin and then apply soy sauce. This is a folk remedy. My elder sister-in-law and my mother-in-law, one pressed her husband and the other went up to peel off the skin and apply soy sauce. Harrison's screams pierced through the roof. Even through my mobile phone, I found it deafening. "Ah! It hurts. Mom. Sister. It hurts." Harrison's face, neck, and arms, which were red from being scalded, made him struggle like a trapped animal in pain. His skin was peeled off by his own mother and then soy sauce was applied by his own sister. Harrison actually passed out from the pain with red eyes. And the burly men who came to collect the debt were all stunned one by one. There's still such an operation? That's really something. I looked quietly at the messy scene on the mobile phone monitoring and finally shed tears. Harrison is such a big man. He can be in so much pain from being scalded by a thermos of boiling water. My son Kiki is only 2 years old. How much pain should he have been in back then? This group of murderers, I want them all to be punished. Just as I was thinking, Kiki, who had just woken up from his nap, cuddled up to me cutely and called me in a milky voice, "Mom." I hugged him and kissed him. My heart was full of sweetness. In the end, it was my husband's elder sister's husband who carried Harrison to the hospital. When the doctor saw that Harrison had been severely scalded over a large area, had his skin torn off and soy sauce poured on it, he was furious. He scolded my mother-in-law and my husband's elder sister as if they were grandchildren. "In this day and age, why are you still using such a deadly folk remedy? The patient could have been given first aid for the scald originally. Now, it's certain that there will be a large area of infection endangering life. Immediate surgery and admission to the ICU are required. Family members, get the money ready." But where is the money? My mother-in-law doesn't have much savings. My husband's elder sister just spent 150,000 yuan as a house deposit and is even more reluctant to pay. The two of them can only call me frantically. But I have long blocked them. In the end, my husband's elder sister thought of a way. She launched a crowdfunding campaign on a medical crowdfunding platform. This is a good way. But because their family is not very good people, not much money was raised. Only enough for Harrison's treatment halfway. Next, other methods have to be thought of. My best friend Rachel quietly went to the hospital to inquire for me. After waking up, Harrison was extremely painful. His will to survive was extremely strong. When I didn't answer the phone, he had the idea of selling the house. Sister, can you sell that house? It's not that Dalong must go to a key primary school. Isn't it okay to go to an ordinary primary school in our hometown? If this house is sold, I can have the money to save my life. The elder sister, who always talked about loving her younger brother, changed her expression. Harrison, it's not that I don't want to save you. Dalong is a genius. How can he go back to the village and attend an ordinary primary school? That 150,000 yuan is being held tightly by Nancy, this bitch. I'll go and ask her for it. If we have 150,000 yuan, can't we save you? My husband's elder sister went to my home in the neighboring city. I called home in advance and tearfully told them everything that had happened during this period. When my husband's elder sister arrived at my door, my father hit her with a shovel. Almost knocked off her skull. She was so scared that she ran away. How dare she go there again? But at the hospital, my husband's elder sister never went there again. Originally, she wanted to go back to Mai and Harrison's house and wait for her son to go to primary school. Who knew that those debt collectors didn't give up? They splashed paint on the door of the house, went there in the middle of the night to intimidate the child, play horror movies, making people unable to live in peace. My husband's elder sister's husband couldn't stand it. Afraid that something might happen, he took the child and went back to his hometown. But after all, this is a house exchanged for 150,000 yuan. My husband's elder sister was unwilling to leave and wanted to stay. Several strong men directly lifted her up and threw her downstairs, breaking one of her legs. My mother-in-law was taking care of Harrison in the hospital. But in the middle of the night, she would always suddenly sit up and say in horror, "Kiki is crying. Kiki is crying." Even once, she walked to someone else's hospital bed like a ghost and asked creepily, "Kiki is crying. Do you know?" The doctors and nurses were very scared and quickly contacted the mental hospital to take my mother-in-law away. At this point, only Harrison was left alone in the hospital. He repeatedly called me and sent me messages on WeChat crying, "Nancy, come and see me. My mother and my elder sister have both left and don't care about me anymore. I'm in pain all over. The pain is so bad that I can't live anymore. My face is festering. Wife, I only have you now. Kiki is gone. We can't be separated again. Please, come and see me. My chest, arms, and face don't have a single piece of good skin. I look like a ghost now. Wife, you will definitely come and see me, right?" How could I have time to see him? During the day at work, I wear an appropriate dress and have a gentle smile. Clients make deals one after another. At night, I hug Kiki, tell him stories, and coax him to sleep. My life is full and happy, stable and full of hope. But I still went there once. After all, we have to talk about divorce. Unexpectedly, just as I arrived at the door of the ward, I encountered the scene of my husband's mistress, that young and lovely in turn, kneeling by the bed and holding his hand and crying bitterly. "Brother Harrison, I really love you. I already have your child in my belly. It must be a son. If you sell the house and give me the money, I will give birth to the child. I will come to the hospital to take care of you." Harrison's face didn't have a single piece of good skin. Looking like a ghost, it was extremely creepy. He forced a bitter smile. "Jojo, that house has been transferred away by my elder sister. She doesn't answer the phone now and doesn't come to see me anymore. The debt collectors are staring at the house. It's not that I don't give it to you. I really have no way. Jojo, I beg you. Stay with me here. Is there really my child in your belly?" The little intern was stunned for a moment and her tears stopped. She burst into tears. "Why? Why is this happening? Brother Harrison, didn't you say that you would divorce your yellow-faced wife and marry me? How could this happen? Now the person is disfigured and there is no money." While coaxing Harrison, she escaped from the hospital on the pretext of going to the toilet. I stared at her back and pressed the recording button on my phone. Want to get away unscathed? It's not so easy. Soon, Jojo's internship unit, school, and her parents' work units all received a video. In the video, she knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, telling that she was pregnant with Harrison's child and mentioning Harrison's promise to divorce and marry her. Such a sensational scandal spread quickly. JoJo was fired on the same day, and the university diploma that was about to be obtained disappeared without a trace. Her parents lost all face. I heard that her father hung her up and beat her. JoJo was so angry that she slit her wrist and almost died. From then on, her life can never wash away the humiliating stigma of having been a mistress. And this is what she deserves. The day I went to see Harrison, he was lying on the bed, crying bitterly and constantly repenting. Nancy, I was wrong. I was really wrong. I shouldn't have sided with my mother. I shouldn't have helped my elder sister bully you. It turns out that they were all deceiving me. Only you are sincere to me. When I leave the hospital, I will definitely continue to look for Kiki. I smiled and squatted down, carefully admiring the scald on his body. In fact, it still wasn't harsh enough. After all, Kiki died because of the scald, but Harrison survived. However, for adults, perhaps a fate worse than death is an even more painful outcome. I gently pressed on his wound and whispered in his ear, "Honey, you're wrong. I'm not sincere either. My sincerity is only for Kiki. Whoever bullies Kiki, I will take their life." Harrison was stunned. His tears seemed to freeze, and the look in his eyes when he looked at me was also a bit fearful. I smiled and took out a divorce agreement. "If you sign, this farce will end here. I promise you can have money to continue staying in the hospital. If you don't sign, I will let you know what the most vicious woman is like." "Harrison, didn't you always call me vicious?" "Well, isn't it exciting when I'm really vicious?" Harrison's hands trembled. After hesitating for 10 minutes, he finally signed. The divorce proceeded smoothly. A lawyer was hired. Harrison couldn't appear in court due to serious injuries, but I also successfully obtained the divorce certificate. A few months later, Harrison was discharged from the hospital but left with many after effects. After all, when I promised to let him continue staying in the hospital, I didn't say I would give him the best treatment. He was severely disfigured, had muscle weakness in his arm, and walked with a cane. When walking on the road, he would be mistaken for a ghost. His life is ruined. I heard that he and his elder sister-in-law still had a big fight over the house in the end. Harrison's psychology was distorted, and he took out a knife and stabbed his own elder sister. Both the palm and the back of the hand are flesh. The mother, who had just been discharged from the mental hospital, persuaded her daughter to forgive her son. The elder sister-in-law was so angry that she tried to commit suicide in the hospital. Unexpectedly, she stepped on empty air and really jumped off the rooftop. She died on the spot. The son is ruined and the daughter is dead. The mother-in-law wailed and howled. The mental illness that was finally cured showed signs of recurring again. But she really relapsed on the day a year later when she met me on the road while picking up junk with her disfigured and disabled son. That day, I was wearing high heels and delicate light makeup. I had just gone shopping for new clothes for the changing season with Kiki. Because of my hard work, I had saved up some money. There was no problem at all in supporting myself and Kiki. In addition, it was already enough to pay the down payment for a small apartment. I was about to sign a contract with the real estate agent with Kiki and a big bag of new clothes. The mother-in-law stared at me in astonishment. Her lips trembled violently and she knelt down in front of me with a plop. "Kiki!" She turned and ran in horror. "Kiki! Kiki is coming for me again. Kiki wants my life. I will never play mahjong again. Why is Kiki still coming for me?" The old woman ran for her life. Harrison didn't have time to ask me what was going on with Kiki. Instead, he turned and limped to chase after his mother. Suddenly, a large truck turned and drove over. I immediately covered Kiki's eyes. Bang! Screams arose behind me. Some people shouted that a large truck had hit and killed 2 people. I took Kiki and turned around and left. Kiki obediently asked me, "Mom, what was that sound just now?" I smiled and said, "Bang. It's the sound of fireworks. Mom is going to lead Kiki to live a better life."